parts of that lecture. And so if you want to chunk it in that way when you're coming up with your review list or you're studying and you're kind of organizing everything, okay, you start off with the general components of the endocrine system and understanding how it is related to other systems. The second part is focusing on just the pituitary gland and its relationship to the hypothalamus. And then the third part are the pituitary targets. These are the glands that are also going to be secreting hormones in response to something from the pituitary, and the remainder of the other glands that are not quite directly associated with the pituitary gland. So that includes not just the pancreas, but also a little review the pineal gland, what it does. Also, let's see, pancreas, pineal gland, the parathyroid gland, and the other cells of the thyroid that produce a different hormone. The thyroid is going to end up producing two different hormones. And when it produces two different hormones, that means there are going to be two cell types that are found in the thyroid, and they're going to be treated separately because they have different effects, okay? So let's just keep going. As hormones, she's probably in good company. A lot of people are not having a good week in general, and that's okay. Okay, so negative and positive feedback. I'm not going to go super deep into this just because it is mostly going to be physio. However, this is important to know when you are trying to understand how the disorders are working. Because ideally what a hormone is supposed to do, a hormone is not going to be secreted 100% of the time, 24 hours a day. That is not how hormones work. Hormones are secreted typically in response to something else. So only if there is a need for that hormone to be secreted is when that hormone is going to be secreted. And typically the reason why we would secrete a hormone is to undo some kind of stimulus, to undo some kind of temporary condition. What does that mean? That is negative feedback when we're trying to undo something. A classic example of negative feedback. We look at how insulin works. Insulin works classically by negative feedback. You eat something, your blood sugars go up, your blood glucose goes up. We can't have our blood glucose up all the time, so what we need to do is we need to allow for cells to take up that blood glucose. When they take up that blood glucose, then the blood glucose should decrease when those target cells take up that blood glucose. In order for us to do that though, the pancreas needs to secrete a hormone that will signal cells to take up that glucose and lower our blood sugar. That hormone happens to be insulin. So, what was the original stimulus? High blood glucose. In response to high blood glucose, your pancreas is going to secrete insulin. Insulin is going to meet its targets, and it's going to stimulate the targets of insulin for those target cells to take up glucose from the blood. And hence, what will happen? Your blood glucose is going to go down. So you originally had, your original stimulus was that your blood glucose was too high, and we're going to undo it. That is negative feedback. And positive feedback is a little different. Positive feedback is only going to be in certain situations. Only the two situations that you should know. Oxytocin works by positive feedback. Oxytocin, which we'll go over, those are my Thursday, we're going to go over what oxytocin is. Oxytocin is a hormone from the posterior part of the pituitary, and that job of oxytocin is to do two things. To increase uterine contractions and to increase milk release. Okay, so lactation. Not milk production, but milk release. How does it work by positive feedback? In positive feedback, you're not trying to undo something. You are trying to accelerate something, okay, a process, in order to achieve a desired end result. In the two examples I gave you, what is desired end result of increasing your uterine contractions? Childbirth. Once that baby is out of the uterus, there is no reason for that uterine muscle to contract anymore. Oxytocin is going to turn off. But until the baby is expelled, oxytocin is going to cause uterine contractions. And the uterine contractions is actually going to increase the secretion of oxytocin. And then oxytocin is going to increase uterine contractions some more, which is going to stimulate more oxytocin. And so you kind of see there's a positive feedback loop that's going to happen. There isn't an undoing of anything. And that positive feedback loop is only until the desired effect is achieved, which is childbirth. Same idea with milk release and milk release. The more that the baby suckles on the breast, the more oxytocin is going to be released, which is going to cause more milk to be released, which is going to cause the baby to likely suckle more on the breast, which is going to cause more oxytocin and more milk release. When does that stop? Until the baby stops feeding. Okay? Again, that is positive feedback. Right? One analogy that's commonly used for this is the idea of how a thermostat works. How many of you know how a thermostat works? A thermostat that is tied to a heating and a cooling system. Let's hear from someone on this side. It's awfully quiet on this side. How does a thermostat work? Go ahead, Kate.
I guess I think I know how it works. It's like
Okay.
you turn it on to set it to a certain temperature.
That's important. You set it to a certain temperature. Okay.
And then once it turns on and it starts working to get the area to a specific temperature, then when it's at that temperature, it turns on.
Exactly. Okay. What is that an example of? So let's say we set the room to, what, 72, right? Let's do 72. That means that, okay, and I'm gonna get to you, Colton. Are you asking a question or are you answering a question?
Answering.
You're answering, okay. I wanna hear like, because we're quiet on this side, so we wanna make sure that everybody has something, okay? And so I'm gonna let you answer some, but I want somebody else to answer something else, okay? So let's say that we set it at 72 and then the room gets to, I don't know, 65. What's going to kick in? Let's say it's tied to an AC and a heater. Which one of those is going to kick in when the room hits 65? Colton?
The heater.
The heater. And then the heater's gonna keep working until we reach what?
The
72, whatever we set at, right? Right? Okay, if let's say it's a hot day and then the room ends up being at 80, what's gonna kick in? The cooling, okay? And it's going to allow for the temperature to go back down to 72. So what does this mean? Regardless of what direction it's coming from, whether it's gonna bring the temperature up or it's gonna bring the temperature down,
We're trying to keep it at
we're trying to keep it at homeostasis,
homeostasis.
which is 72 degrees. Even if you are bringing the temperature up from 68 to 72, even if it's going up, that's not positive feedback. That is still negative feedback. So that's something I want to really emphasize with you, because sometimes we see positive, oh, does that mean it's getting higher? Not all the time. Negative feedback is simply an undoing. It's a reversal. Regardless of the direction we're coming from, we are reversing that 68, making sure it hits 72. We are reversing that 80 degrees, making sure that it hits 72. Regardless of what direction you're coming from, that is still negative feedback. Positive feedback was working. If it were working, how would that thermostat be working if it operated by positive feedback? Let's say you have it at 72 originally, and then it gets to be 80 degrees. What would that look like? And this is not a good thing. What would it look like if that thermostat operated by positive feedback and the room hit 80 degrees?
It would continue until.
What's gonna kick in? The heater or the AC?
AC.
If it were positive feedback though,
It would be the heater then.
it would keep being the heater. 80 degrees to 90 degrees. So in other words, we're not trying to keep something within a certain range if it's positive feedback. We are, let's say it worked by positive feedback for the purpose of creating a sauna in the room, right, as the end point. We're gonna keep kicking on the heater until we get to actually achieving a sauna. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. So what is disease? When negative feedback goes wrong, and that the systems in place start to ignore the signals of having too much or too little. Okay, we'll go over that a little bit later. So what I want you to do is, okay, so this is almost always controlled by negative feedback loops. I'm not gonna fill this out with you. I want you to go home and fill that out yourself based on what you know about negative feedback, okay? Your options are too little or too much. And that's your concept check for the very first part, all right? Okay, now we are in part number 2. And with part 2, this is all lab stuff. So first, know the locations of where the glands are. Be able to identify where they are in the body to start, okay? Pituitary gland will spend a lot of time. Thyroid, adrenal gland, and the gonads, they have a very special relationship, not with each other, but to the pituitary gland. There are hormones from this gland that are going to directly affect the secretion from each of these areas, which is why they have a special relationship with that. Pancreas is going to show up twice. Endocrine is 10% of that pancreas. Exocrine / digestive system related is 90% of that pancreas. We're going to end up seeing this gland 2 times in this unit, and there are going to be some others. Okay, I'm going to give you some answers to the fill-ins, just so we can picture it. The pituitary gland is also known as the hypophysis, and it's divided into 2 parts. But we're going to talk about it as a whole for now, just to give you an idea of where it is. It's located just inferior to, what is that region of the brain that's going to sit just above it? It's not the midbrain. Which one? Hypothalamus. Okay, excellent. Hypothalamus. It's housed within the sella turcica of, what was the name of the bone that had that saddle-shaped feature? The sella turcica. The butterfly one. What is that one? The sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone. It's connected to the hypothalamus by a thin stalk. This one you might not know, but you had to kind of fill it in and find out about it when you were in the nervous system. Okay, this is the infundibulum. That's the stalk. And then we divide that hypophysis into anterior and posterior lobes. Those in my Tuesday, what was the name of the anterior part of that? The whole thing was called the hypophysis. What was the name of the anterior portion of it? It is epithelial nature, which is good, okay, but what did it mean by epithelial? It was a 5-letter prefix at the front. AD. It's okay. Adenohypophysis. If you didn't get the spelling of it, that's fine. You have it in lab, okay? Adenohypophysis is also known as the anterior pituitary. The technical name is adenohypophysis. I will accept anterior pituitary on the final exam. But if you saw adenohypophysis as an answer choice, let's say on the final lecture exam, you should recognize that as being the anterior pituitary, the anterior part. What was the posterior lobe called? Because it was made up of nervous tissue. Neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis. And that has consequences for the type of hormone that they secrete and how they are made and where they are made. So we have our 2 lobes, anterior, and we have our posterior. They're made up of 2 different tissue types. Bless you. One is epithelium, the other one is nervous. And how the hypothalamus controls the endocrine function of this pituitary. So here's the hypothalamus right here. This is for an idea of where we are. This would represent what was the optic chiasm, and so the optic tract and the optic nerve is anterior, just anterior to this, to just give you a little bit of a view of where things are, okay? And then here is the posterior part. This is the neurohypophysis, and this is the adenohypophysis. What you might notice from here is the blood flow. There's a difference in blood flow, and there is a reason for that. So the difference in blood flow is especially important in the anterior part. Because if you notice, there is a capillary bed right here where the hypothalamus is. This is technically part of the hypothalamus. And then there is a second capillary bed that is specifically for the adenohypophysis. If you have two capillary beds that are joined by a vessel, what would that be called? Two capillary beds joined by a blank vein. I heard it? Portal. It's a portal system. You have two examples of portal systems. What was the first portal vein that you saw? This is from cardiovascular. Which one? The hepatic portal vein. That was the one that was going to be bringing blood into the liver. What did it connect? The digestive system to the liver. And then from there, from the liver, we ended up going into the inferior vena cava. So you have two capillary beds. This is the second portal system that you should know. This is what's called the hepatic portals, not the hepatic, the hypophyseal portal system. Hypophyseal meaning pituitary related. Hypophyseal portal system. So you have one capillary bed here, a second capillary bed, and then you have portal veins connecting both of them, called the hypophyseal portal veins. That means that the hypothalamus is going to release something into this capillary bed. That something released in the capillary bed, rather than going to the general circulation and getting diluted, it has to be directed only to the anterior pituitary. And then the anterior pituitary can secrete something that's going to go to general circulation. So just like a portal system as before, where it allows for us to concentrate certain things to go from one area and direct it to just one place. We don't have the case in the posterior pituitary, okay? So we're not going to need to know one for that one, because this one is actually not going to be controlled by the hypothalamus in the way that this side would. And the reason why it's different is because the neurons that make up this part, they came from the hypothalamus to begin with. So in our lab, what we're going to end up doing is, this is really all the neurons that are extending into that posterior lobe, into that posterior pituitary, because it's all nervous tissue. So the cell bodies that makes the hormones that come out here actually are made in the hypothalamus, and they're not made here. The hormones that come from this side are made directly from this area. So that's something that's really important to emphasize, okay? I don't want you to memorize the name of the secondary plexus and all the other parts. I just want you to know generally how this hypophyseal portal system works. So what are the things that the hypothalamus is going to secrete? This, by the way, you do not need to know for lab. This is something you need to know for lecture. Okay. Hypothalamus is going to secrete what are called releasing factors into that very first capillary bed. Those releasing factors are going to act like hormones. They are hormones, and they're going to direct just in that area, okay? So there's GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. What is a gonadotropin? That is FSH and LH. So if this is the releasing hormone for a gonadotropin, that means that this is the hormone that has to go to the anterior pituitary so that the anterior pituitary can send out FSH and LH, and that FSH and LH can target the gonads, and they can secrete steroid hormones. Okay, that was a lot. It's only going to happen 3 times. 1, 2, and 3, okay? So this is where I'm going to give you the analogy of the managerial hierarchy in the company called the Endocrine company. At the very top, you have the CEO. The CEO, let's name her, I'm gonna make her female. Let's name her Miss Hypothalamus. Okay? Hypothalamus is the CEO. Under the CEO, there's a gland that is going to be the second hand to that CEO. This is the one that's going to be the managing director. The managing director, we're going to name that one anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary, as the managing director, is in charge of the floor supervisors. The floor supervisors, there are 3 main floor supervisors I want you to know. Their names are thyroid, adrenal cortex, and gonads. Then there are the other employees that do not fit into those, but their role is just as important. And those other employees are the ones that are going to report to the floor supervisors, the 3 floor supervisors. All of those are going to be the targets of whatever instructions the floor supervisors are going to give. So let me list that little hierarchy again. I'm going to list it on this side. Okay, does this hierarchy make sense? I'm gonna start filling in some blanks. Okay. GnRH, going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to secrete. LH, FSH, which is going to target the gonads. And then the gonads are going to secrete steroid hormones, which have varying effects on various tissues. Are you guys following me so far? Cool. Okay. The thyroid. That's TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone. We're gonna do the same thing. By the way, abbreviations are allowable, but we should know and understand what the abbreviations stand for. That's really important because things can change. Okay, TSH is different from TRH, which is different from TH. And it's just a matter of one letter that changes everything. It's completely different hormone. So watch the letters. Watch the letters. Okay. TRH is going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to be able to stimulate the thyroid with TSH. And that thyroid is going to secrete in response to TSH, T3 or T4, aka TH, thyroid hormone, and that is going to stimulate various tissues. Okay, what's the last one over here? Okay, adrenal cortex. That would be CRH, corticotropin, blank, blank. What is that? What is RH then? Releasing hormone, yet again. It's going to be the same. Releasing hormone. What is the RH over here? Releasing hormone. Growth hormone, releasing hormone, we're not going to spend a lot of time on. Okay? We're just going to focus on those first 3. And so that's going to complete our picture. Hypothalamus, okay. What's this last one? Corticotropin releasing hormone to the anterior pituitary, which will cause the anterior pituitary to secrete ACTH, which is adrenocorticotrophic hormone. So in other words, this by nature is called the gonadotropin. This by nature is called the thyrotropin. And this by nature is called a corticotropin, which is why we have releasing hormones for these very things. So now we've got our ACTH stimulate the adrenal cortex. Cool. What is the adrenal cortex going to release? All right. Cortisol. Another one is aldosterone. Okay, those are the main ones. Right? We can also include in here sex steroids. These are all steroids, by the way, and these are all steroids. Okay, this one's a little different, you don't need to worry about that. But this is also going to be a target of various tissues. So now that we have that relationship, we can have releasing factors or releasing hormones. We're also going to have inhibiting factors that are going to turn off secretion. So why do I include this in here? The idea of stimulate versus inhibit. These are these physiological terms that, especially with the endocrine system, you have to understand how to use them. Okay, a hormone stimulates a target. However, that hormone is secreted by a gland. In other words, use the term gland and hormone in the correct context because it can get confusing. Glands secrete hormones. Hormones do not secrete hormones. Hormones stimulate cells. Glands do not stimulate cells. Glands secrete or release a hormone to stimulate cells, to affect the cells. And so there's the gland, there's the hormone that it secretes, and the effect of that hormone on the target. So there's three essential things when we're looking at the signaling here. There's the gland, there's the hormone it secretes, and there's the target for that hormone. Right. What was the other portal system? Fill in that blank. Which one? I thought I heard it.
Hepatic.
Hepatic, very good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure we have all of our blanks. Please don't memorize this. You know what this is? That's a summary. That's a much bigger picture of that. Okay? Only that was included here. Okay, so this little part, this is going to be useful for that little part. That's the posterior part. The anterior part of it that has all of this is captured in here, okay? But you don't need to know all of the specific details unless it's something that I mentioned in lab, which typically is just a summary, okay? So this is more for your general understanding of it, to kind of put it into a context. All right? So this is more for lab stuff, okay? Also, you need to know for lecture, no doubt. It's just that I don't want to end up repeating it. So I'm gonna leave this for you on your own to be able to try to get the big picture, but it's the same idea that we've talked about before, that you have some kind of releasing factors being released into here. They're going to stimulate whatever the anterior pituitary has to secrete, okay? And then those hormones that are coming from there, which would be the following: FSH, LH, TSH, ACTH, they're all getting released into this capillary bed, and then that goes out to the managing directors, okay? So this we go over in lab. My flat pig. This is a memory device to try to remember the hormones of the anterior pituitary. There are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hormones that are going to come from the anterior pituitary. One is a little bit less important than everybody else. No hate on MSH, but if you want to just remember flat pig and take out the my, that's okay too, but I want to give you a bigger picture. I want you to give the whole picture, okay? So your textbook, I believe, also mentioned the MSH on there. That's why I included it. My flat pig. This is going to become useful when you're looking at the hormones just of the anterior pituitary. And then you only have 2 for the posterior pituitary. What was the name of that little bridge in between the hypothalamus and the pituitary? What do we call that? That little bridge, that little stalk at the top. Thank you very much. Infundibulum, okay? The axon terminals are in the posterior pituitary. So, true or false? The posterior pituitary makes the hormones vasopressin, and oxytocin. True or false? True or false? The anterior pituitary, the posterior pituitary makes the hormones ADH and oxytocin. The posterior pituitary makes it. I see some head shaking.
Yeah.
Okay, why is it false? Because it's created in the hypothalamus. What this part is made out of are neurons. We never make anything in the axon terminal. Where are all the neurotransmitters? If you go back to a neuron, where are all the neurotransmitters made? What part? That part, yes, whatever that is, Gwen, this. Can you draw it? Can you air draw it? This thing?
Yeah.
What is that thing called, everybody? The big thing, where everything happens. Oh, the cell body, guys. The cell body. You gotta know your neuron, your neuron anatomy. The cell body, the dendrites, the axon hillock, the axons, and the axon terminals. The cell body. The neuron makes everything in the cell body. It just sends it down the axon. That's not making it. So just like that, because this is made up of neurons, the neurons happen to be in the hypothalamus and the infundibulum and the posterior pituitary. And so it's going to go that whole length. So that means that these hormones are actually made, not in the pituitary, but they are made in the hypothalamus. And they are sent through the infundibulum and they are released from the axon terminals in the posterior pituitary. Okay? We will go over these functions in lab. We're going to briefly talk about them. Okay, those are my Tuesday. You would have gotten the general function already. So this is just a much better picture. Notice where all the cell bodies are. They're up there. They've got very long axons, and this is where the hormones are being released into that bloodstream. Yes, take it.
Sorry, can you repeat what the hypophyseal tract is also known as?
The hypophyseal infundibulum.
Okay.
This is the one. So this whole stalk is called the infundibulum. The tract is part of that, but just know it as the infundibulum, that's fine. That's the whole stalk. Okay, that's your concept check for part 2. Let's try to answer what we can from this just by looking at it. The differences between anterior and posterior in tissue type and controlled by the hypothalamus. Let's do it tissue type. What is the difference in tissue type between the anterior and posterior? What are the tissues that they are made out of? Think big, four big tissues. What's the anterior part made out of? And what is the posterior part made out of? Okay, posterior is made up of nervous tissue, and what's anterior made out of? Just in general, we're gonna go just big general. Okay, Gwen. Epithelial tissue. How this had developed, actually that pituitary gland, a part of it came down from the brain and became the posterior part. And then a part of it came up from what would become the ceiling of your mouth to become the anterior part, which is why anterior is epithelial and posterior is nervous. Okay. Can you name me 3 releasing factors secreted by the hypothalamus? Name me 3 releasing hormones coming from the hypothalamus. The answer is up here. I want everybody to just read it off. Which one? Okay. What are they? I heard one. This one isn't growth, but G is for something else. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. And then what's this one? Thyrotropin releasing hormone. And what's this one? Corticotropin releasing hormone. So the 3 main ones. Awesome. Name and describe the 7 hormones secreted by the adenohypophysis. What is the memory device that I want you to remember at the bottom of that slide? My flat pig. My flat pig. My is actually for MSH, and you don't need to write all of this because you're going to get in the lab. My is for MSH. Flat, FSH, LSH, LH. It's pretty much these. FSH, LH, ACTH, TSH. Do you notice the flat part? That's the only one that's captured in this.
The only thing
Okay.
missing is the Y and the I.
The Y and the I, it's just, they're fillers, just to make it a memory device, okay? Y doesn't stand for anything, I does not stand for anything. They are filler letters, okay? And then what are the other? Okay, so that's pig, right? P and G are the last ones. Prolactin is gonna be one, growth hormone is gonna be the last one. That gives us all of our 7. Okay, name and describe the 2 hormones secreted by the neurohypophysis. Give me 2 hormones based on what's in your lecture. Can I have 1 hormone from this side and I want the other hormone from that side for the posterior pituitary? Give me one. Oxytocin. Oxytocin has been taken. What's the other one? Vasopressin is the other one, also known as ADH. Yes?
Where did you say prolactin goes in this thing?
Prolactin is my flat P, so P, and it does not have, it doesn't exist in this
Okay.
kind of arrangement, at least that you should know.
Okay, but
It does, but you don't need to worry about
It
it.
is released from the
Yes, yes,
anterior.
correct, correct. Everything in my flat pig is from the anterior pituitary. All right. Are these hormones made in the pituitary gland? The 2 hormones that you just named? Yes or no?
No.
No. Where are they made?
Hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus. Very good. Very cool. So now we're in the last part of that endocrine and the targets, but right now I think I want to give you guys a break. I think we're good for a break. I said we're gonna finish endocrine today. Okay, so that's the goal, folks. That's the goal. So we're locking it in.